We've already mentioned that the tongue has salivary glands, and there are salivary glands, small salivary glands in your palate, in your cheek, in your gums, and other locations where you can find small salivary glands. But your larger salivary glands we usually think of are the parotid glands on the side of the head, submandibular up underneath the angle of your jaw, and sublingual right in the middle underneath your tongue. So these larger salivary glands are the subject of our next study. And as we study these, the kinds of secretory units, the places where the saliva is produced, they are referred to as acini, or they are called acinar glands. And there are a couple of different types of acinar glands that I want to bring up. Let's see. These are compound branch glands for the most part, where you have tubes that lead into tubes that lead into more tubes. But to talk about the acinar structure here, this is a single duct that leads into, let's do it this way, coming off a larger duct. So here we have this duct leading into a salivary gland here, and this salivary gland, I'm going to make this a serous gland. The acinar structure, that means it has this flask-like look to it, and it has a central luminal space, and the cells are arranged around that central luminal space. Fairly large, sometimes what we call pyramidal cells. Will remind you of the sweat gland, the typical eccrine sweat gland of your skin maybe in its overall shape, but has different cell types present. These cells usually have the nuclei located toward the base, a little bit. Anyhow, they have a lot of secretory granules. What the product that they're producing, and the saliva, the enzyme, shows up in stained sections as these kind of purple granules. So this is what we call a serous acinus. It produces a watery secretion. That's one of our types of salivary acini in there, serous. Serous acinus. Now the other kind, other than serous, is the mucous. By comparison, here's the duct that leads into a mucous gland. The mucous cells are generally much larger and they don't have the purple staining granule material in there. Their nuclei are located near the base of the cell, way down in here. So in most of our tongue slides where we see mucus and serous types of salivary glands, they will be separated. So you'll have one clump here that's all mucus, another clump that's all serous. In your parotid gland, everything will be serous. They're all serous acini in your parotid glands. In your submandibular glands, you're going to have a mix of mucus and serous cells. And sometimes within the same acinus, you'll have both mucus and serous cells. When that happens, as a result of the preservation process, the serous cells get displaced to the outside of the mucous acinus, and they form what's called a serous demilune, and we'll draw that next. So we have a duct that leads into the gland. Here's our duct coming in, made of cuboidal epithelium typically. But as we go into the gland, we get these large mucous cells that show up in here. And between these mucous cells, originally there were some serous cells. But as the preservation process occurs, the serous cells get pushed to the outside of the mucus secreting cells. So we end up with these little caps of serous cells out here on the perimeter. Little groups of cells stuck on the outside of our acinus that are called serous demilunes. So we have these nice serous cells located outside of the mucus secreting cells here. So in a submandibular gland, you'll see a mix of serous mucus and mucus with serous demilunes in the tissue. One more drawing to make. In the sublingual glands, we have mostly mucous tissue. We do see sometimes those serous demilunes, but as we go into the sublingual gland, we'll get these mucous glands that are extended for a length. They're not a circular kind of structure, and we call them tubuloacinar glands. So we get a lot of mucus cells forming a tubular structure like this, tubuloacinar glands. So we've shown serous mucus, mucus with serous demilunes, and a mucus gland that is a tubuloacinar in its shape. I better label a couple of things here. Serous demilune, D-E-M-I-L-U-N-E, and this is called a tubuloacinar gland. So now we're ready to do the comparison of the different types of salivary glands in the mouth.